A lot of the rest of us aren't that lucky because we're not on Salesforce. HubSpot, Slate, Velocify, all of Hobson's Radius, all of those, you can still do this. It just takes some different code. So for everything that's not Salesforce, there's not just a pre-written in Google Ads, like here's step one, step two. You can find it in Google documentation, but I'll lay it out pretty concisely for you here. What you're going to capture instead in this case is the Google Analytics ID. So if someone lands on your website and you have Google Analytics, they are tagged with an ID. This is how Google Analytics tracks and runs all of their sessions. This is how you go back into analytics and start seeing months after the fact what individual users did. If you're ever bored, go into Google Analytics and go into Behaviors User Explorer, and you'll see all these ID numbers in there. Those are individuals. GA will not give us personal identification information. They won't show us this person was Brian Walker who did this, this, and this, but they will give you all of these analytics ID numbers in that User Explorer. That's what's assigned to someone when they land on a website. Once again, Google wrote the code. It's just a snippet, a piece of JavaScript. You put it on your site, and what it will do is it will store as a client ID variable what that analytics ID is. Your form then grabs it and passes it into the CRM, just like the GCL ID, just like any other parameter we made. So again, both instances, Salesforce and otherwise, we have taken a concept of all these tracking parameters and we've just added one more to it. The final one we added just happens to be one that Google created themselves. And this is the magic piece that's going to tie it all together. Now, don't glaze over when you look at this. I tend to as well. Just hear me out and we'll talk through it a little bit. This is where if you have a developer or an agency, is my one plug here for today, that does it themselves for you, it really comes in handy. Google Analytics has an API. There's a lot you can do with it. This one is called the measurement protocol. You can Google this and fall down a rabbit hole, but just know it's called the measurement protocol. It allows you to build a custom URL and fill in things like your Google Analytics ID and the client ID that you just grabbed, the GAID number that you just grabbed as a new parameter, and fill in these things and fire it back into GA and create an event every time you fire it. So what this would do, it would create an event. It would do it in the analytics account that you specify. It would match the event to the user of the ID number that you grabbed, and it would name the event lead, demo set, yada, yada, whatever you want for the event, like category label and all that. You can build all that out every single time. So if I filled in that piece and this piece right here and clicked it, it would load up a blank page, but it would actually create an event right then and there in that analytics account. It's called the hit builder. If you've ever used Google's URL builder to build out UTMs, you can actually go to the hit builder and build out these by specifying what you want to name your event, all the parameters, what the client ID for GA is, and what your GA account is. So here's where the magic happens. In your CRM or in your system, and it's going to be wildly different for various systems, and this is the part that, to avoid people getting too bored, I won't go into every single one. I'll just say that work with your system administrator and or your developer. We create a script that basically runs daily from the CRM, typically at the end of the day, middle of the night, whenever, using a batch method, and basically over and over for any newly created or changed milestones in the CRM, it will build these over and over and fire them out. At the end of the day, what that script is doing when it runs every night, it's taking every single user ID that we have grabbed, and it's going to pull into the naming conventions of the event, whatever those milestones in the CRM are, and fire them. And because we're using the client ID that matches that user up in GA, it will create the event on that specific user's entire website journey for you. So what it will basically do, I'll come back to that in a second, is create all these events for every milestone: raw lead, qualified, contacted, enrolled, interview set, whatever you have. It'll create those events and it will attach them to the individual sessions because of that ID number in GA, which means now that you can go into GA at any point and looking at those events, split out and say, what source mediums got me the most interviews and enrollments? What keywords got the best conversion rate from one to the other? What ads, what, in channels, what geographical locations, devices, any of those reports you pull in GA that you look at a goal or an event outcome, you can now do that. But the events you're looking at are your CRM milestones, like enrollments or student who started. This is very busy. It is very developer heavy. There's a lot when I say I realize schedule a script to run in the CRM with a batch method to fire these into GA every night. I know that's a lot. There are a couple other solutions. My preferred method, ask our developer, they script it out. Based on your CRM, Zapier could also do this as well. If you're not familiar with Zapier, we can talk offline. It's a wonderful program. It's very inexpensive. They've basically built out a lot of code as go-betweens of various systems. Like if you use HubSpot, we have a HubSpot client right now. We turned to Zapier and basically built it out so that every time a deal in HubSpot changes to a new deal stage, it fires it right into Google Analytics and Google Ads as a new event and conversion. It does the matching up for us without a lot of that back-end code. There's a little more control if you build all this out yourself. You can really set a lot more, we find, and choose how often it takes place and all. But in a pinch, Zapier has actually made it really, really easy. You probably won't be able to use it on very obscure CRMs or homegrown systems or any of that. But if you don't have an agency or internal IT dev folks, this is a great place to look to still help you accomplish a lot of what we're talking about. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is get those events into GA. That's the first step here. Because if you're familiar with GA, once it's in there, you can get it into your ads. So take these events. We're firing now. So let's use this hypothetical. Every night we're firing new events into GA that are attaching themselves to the actual users and sessions that first created them. So when someone becomes an enrollment, that source, medium, campaign, keyword, all of those things now have an event tied to it that's enrollment. We can look at that session, that person, and we can look all the way back and see all of the prior touch points that led to that as well. All of those assists that we looked at early on in this deck, we can start looking at those multi-channel touch points. That's where the magic starts to happen. It's no longer last click because it's in GA and it's tied to that session and that user ID. All their previous stuff that was happening all fills in, because analytics is always tying those things together and building that journey for us. That's the magic behind all